Well, let's begin our time together with a word of prayer. Noah Yeager, can you lead us in prayer, please, sir?
Yeah, I'd love to. Lord, thank you so much for this meeting. Thank you for our time of coming together. Lord, thank you for just the fact that we can all connect in so many different stages of life, so many different locations, God, all through Zoom. We are so thankful for how you bring us together for this. Lord, I pray that you would just bless our conversation and that no detail, nothing would fall through the cracks, Lord. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay, Reverend Ruth, Black History Month, and we have lots of strife. Some people have said this is a second wave of civil rights. I don't know that it ever stopped. Talk to us a little bit about what you're learning and what you're telling people and how we could be better at what we're a part of when we're touching people's lives.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity and the privilege to be able to address the group on this topic. When you asked me if I would do it, I said yes right away because, like I said before, it's just a topic that is just kind of overtaken me. I have lots of thoughts, but unbeknownst to me, I got an unexpected prelude to this discussion. Someone gifted me a copy of the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. And that's an editorial work by Claiborne Carson. I encourage everybody to read if you haven't. And I'd like to share today, for the Black History Thoughts, I'd like to share some of the thoughts that were aroused in me as a result of reading that book and where I landed and some of my thoughts. And then we can, if you want to have some discussion around that afterwards, it's fine. It was a really hard read for me. I didn't expect it to be. I think very highly of Dr. King. I was just a child when he began his movement and thought I knew everything I needed to know. But reading the book really profoundly was emotional to me. And so I cried through most of it. So what I've done as a result, but I want to share what I think I kind of got out of it. What I've done is I've written it so that I can read it to you all so that I don't get so emotional. I can get through it and like I know what I'm talking about without weeping in between. So I put some thoughts together on paper. I'm going to read through those and then we can, at the end, want to talk about it, fine, or however you want to approach it. And so I kind of call it a look back and a look forward because I really got a chance when I read that book and I was like, oh my God. All right, so if that's okay with everybody, I'm going to do it to you. All right. So as firstly, prior to reading the book, I certainly felt like I had a pretty reasonable understanding and remembrance of the racial injustice issues that occurred during the lifetime and leadership of Dr. King. However, what I discovered is that while I had an accurate remembrance of the events that took place when I was still a child, thoughts and feelings were painfully shallow. And I didn't know that they were as shallow as they were. As I read about the encounters that he and other civil rights leaders and members of the community faced and engaged, it was as though I was there and witnessing it all anew. Reading through each event provided an incredibly emotional play-by-play of the harsh realities that existed in our country, particularly for Black Americans. And it provided fresh insight of the horrific events that so many Black and others endured. I left that moving reading experience with a somewhat different perspective on the needs and the importance of the pursuit of continued civil and racial justice movements and of the enactment of laws required to sustain the same. I discovered that there is a real difference between knowing about versus actually experiencing the events that took place at that time and that are still taking place today. And I highly recommend the reading of the book for anyone who wants to have more of an experiential knowledge of what did take place and why the nonviolent movement was so crucial, not only to those who were being racially oppressed, but for the generation to be born thereafter. A huge question now 5 decades later from most Americans today is, what should I do to get involved and how can I help? And I concluded that I think part of the reason that question, I think, is based on an absence of having witnessed firsthand the atrocities of racism that existed at that time, coupled with the masked piece that seems to be present today. All of it resulting in confusion amongst present day Black and non-Black Americans of what should I do? Even though we're aware that the racial tensions have lessened to a certain degree, we're also aware that the system of racism is still very much alive today. The recent and chilling events in the news, like the murder of George Floyd, captured by the media for all to see, all over, and the events surrounding the death of Breonna Taylor and others have helped us to find a center on this topic and to voice our rejuvenated beliefs about racial justice. The good news is that the American ideal still exists in the hearts of many Americans. The bad news is that it lies dormant in far too many human hearts. And even worse, the American ideal is vastly different from the American reality. The American ideal is like a pipe dream that never really existed, nor has ever been fulfilled on the shores of America. I think it's idealistic in manner and thought to say the words that are in our Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power, the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So those words are powerful and they're true and they resonate with all of us. We're familiar with them. They make sense to most people. But that problem is they're just words on paper. The fact that we speak a lot about our 4 founders of America, but the reality is America was not found. It was taken from existing natives of the land that were already living there. It wasn't a new discovery. There were people already there, and those persons were forcefully dispersed from the fertile grounds of their lands into desert, barren areas that we now call reservations. Many African descent were later forcefully brought to America to continue to fulfill the true American dream of prosperity and seemingly white supremacy, not by all in America, but by many. A lot of good and reciprocal actions have taken place since those days, but we're still far from the American ideal. And after reading the autobiographical events of Dr. King's life and of the great strides that he and many others have made, it seems clear to me that even in the face of all the things that have come before us, the writings on freedom, the Bills of Rights, the Declaration, there's still a huge looming problem that combats the ideal and keeps it so dark in the hearts of people. And so to me, when I thought about it, as I was reading through the book, and it would describe each event, each march, each city, Montgomery, Birmingham, Chicago, Watts, Chicago. all those places, and they would have such great victories, and then everything would come crashing down on them because racism would rear its head in another city, in another part of America. And I thought, wow, I was going down in emotions and crying and weeping and trying to figure out, well, what is the right approach? I liked the nonviolent approach. It makes sense. It was very successful. Got great laws passed, presidential agreements that moved things along. And yet racism kept coming back up. People kept getting murdered and kept getting assassinated, including Dr. King. And it's like, what is the missing link? And so I was really troubled by it as I was reading through it. And it dawned on me, just my perspective. I said, okay, it's to me, the real issue, why we're still struggling with this absence of an true American ideal being a reality, is it's not because we need more laws per se. It's a human issue. And it all stems from sin. Because I thought, how do we ever make something like this go away? Every time you think you kind of your hands around it, it pops up somewhere else. Because each individual has to make a personal decision about how they want to approach it. So I think that a deeper look at it caused me to think the root cause and what fuels racism from generation to generation and keeps it systemic is human sin. And that's the disconnect between the American ideal and the American reality. Racial and social inequity continues to exist on our American shores in spite of the Declaration of Independence, in spite of the Bill of Rights, in spite of the American ideal that has been accurately projected about America all over the world and causing many to be drawn to the shore of America, seeking that freedom that's been protected. Only to get here, various different groups, Irish, Jewish, Italian, you name it, and okay, this is not such a free country for all after all. And so we projected one image, but we failed at carrying it out as a people. So the question of where do we go from here? I propose that we really have to acknowledge that America has never, ever been the land of the free. People have lost their lives trying to maintain freedom and hold on to the land that was theirs and so forth. And it's a power struggle. It comes down to who wants to be greater than the next person and what they're willing to do to get there. And I think we'll continue to grapple with the injustices that are in America until the truth is told and acknowledged. The British colonials that came over had good thoughts and ideals, but they weren't able to really capitalize on them fully. They laid a groundwork for us to build upon, and I think every generation will have to do that. I think it's not ever going to go away until the end. I think every generation will have to decide, what role do I want to play in helping to make this a better place for people to live? I think it's a personal and an individual kind of a thing that we have to decide. So I think the only way that we could ever truly eradicate racial and social injustice is for the people in America to choose to love one another instead of enact actions of sin. We would have to choose to show love for our fellow man over the desire to have an unyielding, intentional pursuit of the maintenance of power and wealth for a chosen few. America is a wealthy country, but it's only wealthy to a certain number of persons. And those persons who have that power are happy with it and want to maintain it. And for whatever reason, seem to have an absolute bent on keeping others from attaining it. And they'll go to any length to do so. And we've seen a lot of that recently, even in on the TV and the media, some things that have happened in our own capital here in America. So there's still that bent out there that says we have to be on top, we have to be the best, nobody else matters, and we can kill anybody we want to get what we want to have. So it's a sin issue. Those kind of thoughts come from people who chosen not to love, but rather to hate instead, and to be very prideful, self-centered. And I think the only thing that's greater than sin is love. Love never fails. We all want to know what we can do as individuals and as faith-based organizations to help eradicate racism from our lives. And I believe it's called to each person on the land. It's an individual decision that has to be made to choose love, to choose to say, I want to be a person who shows love for my fellow man. I want to do the things that care about other people. Even in this discussion that we started out today, Jim started out just sharing some brief stories of small ways that he got involved, helped and impacted somebody's life. Just by paying attention and realizing, oh, going to the store and getting groceries or whatever is simple for me, but maybe not for the mom who has to take the light rail and has two little tiny kids and only has two hands to hold on to them. It's looking for opportunities and then capitalizing on them. Show I do care about people who have needs that I can meet. I want to do something. You can't do everything, but we all can do something. I started a little project, dates kind of back to when I was pastor at our church at Redeemed Life, but I continued it, and I create little packets that I keep in my car. My husband and I, for the joint, and we fill it up with like a Ziploc bag, and it's got socks and masks and antibacterial sanitizer and money and food and different things. Whatever we feel a person would need, socks, and put them in the bags, and we put a scripture on the outside the bag, just something that would be an encouragement. You know, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Whatever it's going to be that might encourage their day. And then when I see a person, you know, at a freeway stop or what have you, then I can just reach in the bag and give them something, show some love. It can be something as small as that, something really huge, like, you know, enacting a bill that really helps to weigh on those who choose to be, you know, untoward. But all of us can play a part in changing the America that we have today. And what I was really impressed by the book was Dr. King focused on the future. Most of us, I think I shouldn't say that, I'll say people have a focus that's very self-geared. And me, myself, and I, my family, and how we're doing. But I think we got to expand that. We start thinking about what legacy of love do we want to leave on this planet? What do we want our grandkids to believe, and how do we want them to respond to the things that they'll be faced with on these same topics? It's up to us to decide that. We get to determine what to tell them is truth and to prove that it's truth. And we get to show them what love looks like in action. And I just think it can happen from household to household, to look for ways to be a lover of your neighbor. So important. We started, my husband and I were out walking one day in the neighborhood, and a neighbor that we did not know, because again, everybody's in their own home, was outside, and she saw us nearing her home, and she waved us down and asked us to come in to help her. She was elderly, and her husband was elderly, and he had fallen out of the bed, and she could not lift him. And we said, absolutely. We went in, and at her instruction, we lifted him up and got him back in bed. And she was so grateful. And I happened to be a Christian, and it was wonderful. And she asked us our names, and I said, my name is Ruth, and he said his name was David. She goes, oh, David and Ruth. So she got all excited about the biblical name. And she was just so touched by it. And we became wonderful friends after, and her husband died maybe the next year. And then she had to move on to another neighborhood. But she called me the other night, and I didn't know who it was. I thought, who is this? And she told me, she said, this is Dorothy, your neighbor. And I said, oh my God, Dorothy, how are you? And she said, I think about you all the time. And we just had the best conversation. We are, you know, Black. My husband is part Native American. The race doesn't matter. She's Asian. Who cares? We're neighbors, people who are there to take care of each other. I truly believe that our Creator God put us here to take care of each other. What we get more comfortable doing is going to our own individual faith-based groups and having prayer sessions and asking God to do it. And I kind of think he's going, you have to start it. And I think there's so much that we could do that he could engage in with us versus us just praying and hoping that God's going to fix it. We've got power around us that we can actually make a difference in. So again, I think the only thing that's stronger than the sin that's in all of us is love. I think we can all be participants in that by choosing to love one another, by looking for ways to show love. If you take an assessment yourself or your faith-based group and you determine that that you're not doing enough, that literally touches the lives of other people, then that's an opportunity to sit there in groups and talk about, so what else could we be doing that we're not doing that helps people know that they're lovers. There's such a silence out there that good people, if you will, are not speaking what they believe. We just crazy on the media, but the good people really have the power. If you have love in you, that's the greatest power on the earth. And we just got to realize that. Again, it begins in our homes, it begins in daily conversations, in purposeful deeds for reaching out and making a difference in the lives of other people. I've been honestly considering, don't hate me for saying this, I've been a pastor and I understand that. But when we tithe, you tithe the church you go to. We do other giving as well. But maybe we should be changing up the percentage. And maybe more should be going to the nations where they don't have drinking water that's safe. Maybe a little bit to the church edifice. I don't know. Just some thoughts are in my head. Like I said, the book is thinking a lot of different thoughts. What else can I do that might leave a blessing in the life of somebody else, a direct blessing, and get our voices out there to be heard on these matters and not be silent in our homes or just in our closets. So I think our approaches sometimes do have to be sacrificial. When I think about the sacrifices that were made by those in the 60s, oh my God, because I cried through most of it. Whites, Blacks, everybody that got killed and murdered is just amazing, the sacrificial cost. And I was thought about a time when my sister, I have an oldest who was old during King's Day to be engaged in it. And to this day, when it's time to vote, she always reaches out to all the family and says, vote Democrat, vote Democrat. And I always was bothered by that. I thought, I get to vote, I want to vote. I can vote for who I think is the person. But I understand what fueled that in her by reading the book. It was the Democratic Congress that helped push for jobs for all people. And she remembers that, and it's important to her. And so there's so many different things that I learned and I had to think about. And so I realized that the fact that I have choice today is because somebody else lost their lives before to help get the vote out there for Blacks and so forth. It's just so much that we know. There's so much that we can offer in our day. I was thinking about something as simple as, for everyone who's a wage earner or has ever been a wage earner, you always have taxes withheld from your check. You don't get a choice. It just happens. Federal, state, what have you. Security, you name it. What would happen if we suddenly decided that an important thing to help from the of every wage earner, even if it's just 1% of their gross, was a fee that would go to faithful organizations in the world who help feed the hungry, give clean water? What if that was just a norm in America, that we are a loving country and we care about people, so we're willing to do that? I mean, so many things we take for granted. We don't fight per se. We don't like doing tax, but we do it. Why wouldn't we be out there in mass saying, I want you to take this much out of my check and send it? I want it to be an American cultural thing that also comes out of a paycheck. Just little thoughts. I just think it's time for us to change the status quo, to make our thoughts become more others focused and less focused. That would be a good beginning. And I think, again, the exposure of light, us who are aspiring to be the light of the world, I think it's time for us to lift the light. I know we have the light, but we need to lift it up so it can be seen. And the only way to do that is to have acts of love take place that people can visibly see. One of the smart I learned in reading the book by doing the marches is people could visibly see the masses of people on the street with a message of nonviolence. I just think in our day, the people of love really be out there lifting up lights and saying, we're for what's good. We care about one another. We still need effective legislation. I'm aware of that. We still need police reform, definitely. We still need job and economic parity. But none of these accomplishments can fully dispel darkness like light can. And the cool thing about light is it doesn't matter how much it is, it dispels darkness. If you walk into a room that has no light and all you have is a book and you strike one match, it dispels darkness. Light a candle, it dispels darkness. If you have a flashlight, it dispels darkness. If you have a floodlight, it expels darkness. The size of the light doesn't matter, just that light dispels darkness. And so those of us who believe that we have that light, we need to be out there dispelling some darkness in some way or another is meaningful that helps other people. I think we have to choose to live out the American ideal about we hold these truths to be self-evident. We got to live that out in actual discussion, words, what we do say, what we believe in, what we invest in. We got to make that a reality today, and not just deal this on a piece of parchment paper that doesn't help the world at all. I noticed in reading the book that they would get laws passed, but then the governors of certain states would say, I ignore those laws, I'm still going to kill you. And so it's like, okay, so that's not the whole answer. It has to be a heart issue. It has to be something we can do that touches hearts of people, to change them around to seeing the love and the need for love. Where there have been marches, those have ceased. Where there have been proclamations and laws, those have failed. But love conquers everything. Love never fails. And so what we need to do is focus more on love on an individual level, a group level, whatever sphere of leadership and impact you have, use it to send a message of love for all people. That's what I think is most needed in our day to try to help ratchet down racism and social injustice and hopefully eradicate it for future generations. And then lastly, I just want to say it's so important that we teach the children truth and love, because they are just canvases, right? And you write upon those canvases what you need to write on them. If we can reverse what's been written, there's so many people who are hateful today, by teaching young children the truth and how to love people, then they'll grow up thinking it's normal. That just makes sense to them. When I was reading about the first schools that were integrated, I started out in a Black elementary school. The teachers were Black, principal was Black, the students were Black. Then we moved to another neighborhood and it became integrated. It was whites, Blacks, and Hispanics. And then I got married and they went to a school that was predominantly Caucasian. And it's just normal for them. My son has, I would say that all of his closest friends are Caucasians. Why? Because he grew up with them. They played basketball together. They went to school together. They went to GC together. They did things together and they see each other as brothers. So when we can teach children from a young age that all men created equal, then you don't have to. You really won a lot. So we've got a lot going on in our day, but we could at least be focused on the next generation. What can we do to make a better world for them? Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ruth. That was awesome.
Yeah, I really liked the how you brought it all down to the problem is sin. And I really think it's interesting that we see a decline in religious, activity in the United States in the last 20, 30 years. Membership attendance, all that's down. And when you look at the younger generation coming up, like less and less of them believe in God.
Yes.
And then we have this increase in hate, and an increase in violence, an increase in sin, really. And so I think if those are pretty simple concepts to understand, but the problem is, I think a lot of people don't want to even talk about sin, right? They don't even acknowledge that's a problem, or I don't know, maybe it's too personal, or they don't want to acknowledge God in their lives or whatever. But that seems to be the solution. Exactly what you said is increase our love, and maybe in our each of
You
our
know,
settings, increase believership and increase people's attitudes and turn their hearts more to God and then to each other. I thought it was beautiful.
So Ruth,
One
can I
thing
ask oh, sorry, Jim.
let me jump in just ahead of, because of what Rick was saying. I will tell you though, as a person that I grew up in the South, I have a cousin who's married to a pastor of a church that was in one of the so-called Bible Belt states. And when he is a pastor, introduced discussion on inviting people of color to join the church, the deacons would have no part of it. So it's not just about church, it's about the heart.
Yeah.
Because they had every reason in their mind, I'm embarrassed to say, that would hide behind God, use God in such a way to prove their systemic racial thinking.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
as I think I'm going to share it with you before, I just steal a little bit of King's word. I have a dream, and that dream is like today. I just don't see any reason why today we can't get past what you just described and just look at the truth of the word and go for it. One of the things that was so awesome in being that Interfaith Harmony Week panel is there were people from all different faith groups, but at the core of every faith group was love. So we all have this one center that we can wrap around. But I think within individual faith groups, the doctrines and the beliefs are the same. That should be blocking us from allowing the shared worship of persons of color with persons that are white and vice versa, so that we can get to know each other as brothers and sisters versus whatever we've been told over the generations or read or heard in the media. We have to just learn how to love people and just embrace them for who they truly are. And I do think, me personally, that the church has a huge accountability to make that first leap and to get past some of those things about color. Just say, what difference does it make? Do we all believe in the same beliefs? Let's get in here and worship together and show the world and our congregations, which think about how many households would be impacted and visibly see that purposeful sharing. That's something I would be the happiest woman on the planet if we could see that start to happen from church to church and from faith group to faith group. Let's get together and let's show some visibility and mobilize the people to see what's already in their hearts. People do have love in their hearts. They don't know how to share it, and they get blocked by, like you said, leaders in their faith groups that say, we can't do that. We can't have people of other color in here. That wouldn't work. We got to fix it.
Ruth, I wondered if you or anyone else had heard of the book by Latasha Morrison, Be the Bridge. Has anyone read that one? Amy, you have? I'm on the board of trustees of the little seminary where I went years ago, and we had to read. Our vice president for spiritual formation is an African-American woman that really challenged us to do a bunch of reading, and I'm on that committee. And that was the first one we all read, and I'm looking at it over here on my second screen, but it says exactly there, Ruth, what you're talking about. And Latasha's very honest about her own role. She was working in a church in the Austin area, as the only African-American woman there. And I worked in ministry in Texas for a long time before I went on for my psych degree. But so her experience of what she went through, and then how she's building these Be the Bridge groups that literally on racial reconciliation, and how to really sit there, how to talk about forgiveness and make amends for different things. It's a really good book. So it would be a really good small group book to do, let alone start some Be the Bridge groups. It's really excellent. I highly recommend it.
I love that, Amy. I think being able to have those conversations, and I think one of the things that I will throw to you that I think was brilliant of what you just said, that it isn't just, hey, how do we name this? It's how do we actually then listen to one another and build those bridges? And so for anyone here, and so I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, but it isn't, I'm both agreeing and disagreeing with something that you said, Rick, where you said, oh gosh, you know, people aren't going to church as much and we're seeing an increase in sin. I have a sociology background and then also a theology background. I'm like, are you kidding me? We had sin going on when everybody said they went to church, but we didn't talk about it. It was like we were all in kind of like Midwest denial. Oh, if you don't say it, it's not happening. But it was happening. And in fact, some of that meant that while people were going to church, they were then turning around and creating laws that were creating system problems. But because those who went to church made them, people went, oh, I don't want to question them. I mean, they're like the nice people. Except that those laws were only benefiting some people. And in the name of Jesus, we did a lot of harm to a lot of people. And so, and my area really is primarily youth ministry and first thirds of life. You are correct in stating, gosh, we don't have as much documentation of people going to, you know, church, synagogue, communities. I wonder if we've just got more honest. I think a lot of people said they were going when their granny went, even though they didn't necessarily go. Or they went and they really, you know, played tic-tac-toe with their neighbor instead of actually having it impact their lives. So my question, Ruth, or for anyone else here, when we are talking about this sin issue, how do we help people see, you know, we have such an individualistic country. We've also seen theology across traditions be much more individualistic. And so it's like, well, if I didn't hurt you, then surely it must not be happening. And instead, we need to be able to look at some of the systems and say, maybe, just maybe, what we have are sinful systems. And we have some sinful corporate things. And that isn't to say that there aren't individual sinful things happening. But how do we help people lower their defenses and saying, well, I didn't do anything terrible to you, so therefore I didn't have anything to do it. Instead saying, I personally don't land there, but wow, it sounds like we have a law, a rule, a something in place that isn't helpful. And it sounds like the church has turned a blind eye to a lot of this for a lot of years. So yeah. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I have 1,000 thoughts. I'm going to try to make them brief because you touched on some things that I could spend another hour on. But my personal thoughts are, it all starts with first, just unity. First, you've got to mobilize people. I'm thinking about some of the smart things that Dr. King and the leaders did. Then they mobilized people. They got them together. They had like their own chain of communication between churches when they would go into a city. And we all know who, we could go and Google all the churches in our area. We know how to reach out to each other. We have the technology. We have the media that they didn't even have. We need to just get together and start having conversations about how do we unify. It starts with unity. We first have to be on the same page. You're going to always have people who feel like, well, I don't think that's me. Maybe that's somebody else. I don't think I have an issue, or I don't think I have a role. But the reality is, until we can unify people and they can see that, oh, I really probably could have helped that person. Like I said, I keep using even the simple example that Jim gave. Oh, what I thought was not simple. She only has 2 hands. She has 2 kids. I could help out. I have a car. I have this. We got to get people together so they can get to know each other and needs can be seen and then needs can be met. Once you start unifying people, then you get away from that whole thing about, oh, is it me? Oh, it's not me. It is, it's all of us. What God intended was for all of us to take care of all of us, not just one particular group. And so when we can get people to understand that because you share the planet with other humans, you have an accountability to them to be fair and just and loving. You have accountability. And by stepping back and saying, I don't think I've done anything wrong, that must have been poor parents or whoever. Yeah, we got to educate. And so we can do that once we unify. But first we have to unify. And I think that the faith groups are the best place to start because that's where people trust. That's where people have loyalties. And if they believe in their leaders, that the leaders are leading them in a direction that's good, and it's just unifying. And I mean, it's starting out kind of small. Maybe you have a unity service once or twice a year where you invite a church of different color and you go to their church one year, that same year, just in small doses until we get used to interacting one with another. Maybe you have a unity picnic or whatever. You can do a food drive and all the churches come together and we are all feeding people. We just have to be more visible. Visibility and mobilization of people is critical to make a change. Otherwise, people are able to kind of hide back in their own little corners. I don't think that's me. So sorry that happened. Quick little thing may seem unrelated, but it relates to me. I found myself a few years ago when news would come on and it would say someone got a car accident while driving home or something of that nature. And I would think, oh, that's just awful. And then I would move on and go cook dinner and do whatever. And then it dawned on me, what if that was your life? How would you have reacted if the news was that it was your sister, brother, daughter, grandchild, whatever, who was in that accident? And so I made a commitment to myself that every time I hear something on the news or we get an Amber Alert or something of that nature, I purposefully internalize that and say, what if that was my child? Or what if that was my husband? Or what if that was, so that I can feel it. I can experience what that family is going through. It's not just reported accident because we hear about them all the time. It's a life. It's a life and it's a family. And so I have chosen to realize that, and what it does for me is it helps me to intentionally and intensely pray for that family. I don't have to know them to pray for them, but I can at least engage in that way with God on their behalf, as I would want someone to engage for me if it was me. And so I have to get people to come together to be able to experience one another in a healthy, loving, unifying kind of a non-threatening way, so that we can realize, wow, we all share the same needs and wants and desires. And oh, I didn't know that you couldn't vote because of this. Oh, I didn't know that the internet problems are worse in your area because you're a Black community. Oh, I didn't know. And we can then, you'll find things that you can do together. They're going to be all over the place because there's tons of opportunities. There's so many different injustices that exist. And then people will find their own way. They'll find their own way to know how to interact.
I wonder, so I'm thinking about when Ruth, you said, oh, we have to be talking to young people, which I'm all about. I think that's great. I wonder if there's a space for CORA, and Amy, you would probably be the person who might be able to give wisdom into this. Would it ever be a helpful or even allowable thing for CORA to lead one of the Be the Bridge groups and see if they're, so part of it is I've taught university students for the last, 25 plus years. And I always feel like the Grim Reaper because I teach sociology and I teach theology classes, but I'm like, did you know there's systemic racism? And I will have my students of color who are like, Dr. J, like we know that was back in the day, but we've never experienced it. And then by the end of class, they're like, why are we just learning that this has happened to us? And they're like, what is, you know, and I always feel bad because I mean, I've had like big guys, tough guys crying in class saying, I just thought that's what everybody's life was like. I had no idea the deck was stacked against me. And so then I'm like, yes, but you're here and that's amazing. And let's celebrate that. But then I've also had students in class who are like, nah, not happening. But I wonder if now is an appropriate time and if that could possibly be a CORA kind of role.
Well, I mean, the brainstorm in this moment, I know we talked about it in the last meeting that I finally got to be a part of. So thanks for letting me join you all. Let's finally have time. That thinking of even the support circles, doing a Be the Bridge support circle and maybe partnering 2 of our African-American clinicians, both are doing support circles right now for people of color. One is women only, one is all genders, but I'm just so brainstorming. But you know, what if we did a Be the Bridge type of a support circle where that would be another outlet, one realm. I know here at Counseling Services, one of our staff started after George Floyd was killed. She kind of took the lead, and we've been having, it's gotten less as the semesters have gone on, but through the summer and while we were locked down, having weekly discussions and throwing out different topics to read about on race and discrimination, and then our staff was given the option to join. So there's so much going on, but I just wonder if maybe a support circle, while we're still not completely connecting. Now, on the other hand, for downtown campus, Dean Smith has been working with the committee to find a student center place here in the student center for our African American students. You're all aware of that, right? That we now have a location in the basement here. Latoya, in fact, our African American clinician was going to take me down to show me where it is. I'm not sure quite where it is, and she's out this week. But needless to say, you know, maybe starting with that group, and Dean Smith has been working with a committee to help that get started here. You know, kind of saying, okay, how do we just start with a group here at downtown that's more downtown centric with our African American students and some other, whether it's white or other ethnicities, to join together, because the goal of this isn't just one or the other. It's you know, multi-race oriented in the way that the book is designed to get these Be the Bridge groups going. So that would be my other brainstorm, I think. And I can't imagine that kind of a group not being embraced at some level. So I think that's a great idea.
I think a lot of students would be interested. My biggest concern is because I have several friends who are people of color, and they're like, do you know how sick we are of being asked to educate others? And they're like, we're tired of building our bridge. Somebody needs to build a bridge to us. So I want to be certain that, you know, if we do that, but it seems like CORA would be uniquely positioned to at least be supportive in whatever, you know, I don't know all of the in workings of what that might look like, but it does seem like, you know, that for such a time as this, it seems like this would be an important conversation for lots of reasons. And especially, you know, and because it's out of my realm, you know, I think those social students, I also have my, you know, my MSWs from ASU, and they have to take that identity class. And how many at the end of it are like, I'm a horrible human being, but yet I'm called to this service thing. Now what do I do? You know, and the unpacking of that. Ruth's laughing.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to change the subject there. I just want to say, Ruth, I appreciate your thoughts so much, and so much I have to learn. I'd like to just hear from you some more, you know, about maybe some experiences that you have that would help us to understand better steps forward from your own life. Personally, I know you've talked from the book here, but I always find it helpful to hear personal stories as well. I know you shared a few of those, but I'm sure you have a lot that you could probably share with us. And I'm all for doing the groups and brainstorming, but I would also like to hear some more from Ruth. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah,
Let
I
me
mean,
let me jump in right quick, Ruth, before you just
okay.
to answer Amy Jacober's Amy. Everything Amy Wasserbauer was saying is absolutely the same thoughts I had. And because we have social work downtown, what we'll need to do is probably find out who might be a good advocate in front of the students to let them know that we're offering something like this in the spiritual support circles and what that could look like. So I think the idea has merit. We can run with it. So before we move back to you, Ruth, I just wanted to validate that and say we can do that.
And I think the other piece, and at some point maybe Latoya could join, our clinician here at Downtown, because she's in leadership right now in support of our BAC, our Black African Coalition, and the BSU, the Black Student Union. I always want to say Baptist Student Union, but the Black Student Union, and she's been a part of some of their meetings the last year here at the downtown campus, as far as seeing where they would be and being part of that conversation. We would also then maybe want to connect student engagement, Jen O'Brien, with our student government and even the residence hall, like saying, okay, how do we get students involved at the different levels and different places? Again, that would be more downtown centric, but the support circle would be a fabulous first start too. But I think Ruth's stories would be amazing as well.
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, I don't know how much time we have. I won't go on. I have lots of different experiences that I've had. I'm one of those persons, like I said, that I'm standing on the shoulders of someone else, right? Had the harder way. Me in my life, I experienced racial issues, but nothing like what I read in the book, nowhere close. And so, like I said, it does create kind of like a false sense of peace and make that the absence of racism is gone. But I experienced it in the job a little bit. But what I also found is, again, when persons of different colors work together, whether it's in a workplace, in a church, and a committee, doesn't matter. They get to know each other, and the color issue just disappears. It just doesn't continue. And so the more we can do anything that's on a unified basis, that's my number one thing. I guess the thing that burdens me the most in my own personal experience has been my role as the minister, as a former pastor, and having interacted with whose names I certainly won't give because they're significant. But I'm shocked and appalled at what I would call the segregation that exists in the churches. It's like let's just pick on like the Christians. So if we say we're Christian, but we're not of the same denomination, you may or may not be invited to some schools because you're not in the right denomination. I recall when I worked, I used to work for, before it became Chase Bank, it was Valley National. I'll go back a bit, but the largest bank in Arizona. And I was a human resource regional vice president and manager there. But I was also a child of God, and I really loved teaching the word. And so my friends, you should start a study here at work. And long story short, I was scared to do that. I thought it could impact my job, blah, blah. But got all the doors, and we got a room there at the cafeteria there at the bank, and we held a session every week. And people came from all over the downtown area, every race group you could think of, and it just grew and grew to over 50 people. I still have the names of the people. We called it the executive briefing, and it was fun. And we talked about the word, but it was so great to do that and to get people together and to see the walls coming down once you start getting people together of all different races. It doesn't matter, and you can see that there's a lot that happens. So we get afraid of maybe some of the issues might be like in workplaces and what people might think of us, but on the job, in church, it's different. I ran into a different kind of situation there where, again, denominationally, you could be differentiated against. Gender, you could be differentiated against. Color, I was surprised in the African American church. I found that color you could be differentiated against. I was pastoring a church, and we had a Hispanic pastor who did not have a building if he could use our building when we weren't using it, and we worked out a deal, did that. And he said he would love to come to the session that I attended with the other pastors in the local area. And I said, well, I'll ask. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. I was told immediately, they have ours and we have ours. So no, he would not be able to join this particular pastoral group. And I remember being so shocked by the response. I wasn't expecting it. And I said, are you serious? And he said, yes, I'm very serious. And I said, well, that doesn't sound very Christ-like at all to me. I'm shocked at your response. And I moved on. But then I was also involved for quite a season, a pastoral group that, shared the word and so forth, that was all Caucasian. And they had a couple of Black pastors who attended on rare occasion. And I could see the racism there was gargantuan. And I thought, oh my goodness. And the way that the white pastors spoke to the Black pastors, I was like appalled. They treated me nice. Maybe I was a female, I don't know. But it was just amazing to me. And so we've got a lot of work that can just be done within our own groups. We've got to, I was speaking earlier and we're talking about the whole unity thing. But I think that when you bring people together, you do have to bring them first to truth. We have to agree on what is true. And either the word of God is true, that you are to love your neighbor as yourself, or it's not. And if we can't agree with that, we've got an even bigger problem. But what I find is people will say they believe that, but it's like we hold these truths to be self-evident thing, right? It's just on a piece of paper. So it's in a scripture inside of a Bible, and we read it and we preach about it, but we can't let you in. We have to keep pushing at that until we get people faith to honor what they believe in or move on. I just think it's a huge issue. We need to find ways to get into the hearts and minds of leaders within our faith groups who carry those thoughts about race and really don't even think that they're racist. And yet they are the proponents of racism by wanting to be separate. We're not going to accomplish anything individually. We have to do it together. But yeah, I've seen and experienced a lot of different things. One time when I was at work, working at the bank, I was after hours and I was still sitting there finishing up something I was typing, and there was a group of coworkers who had gathered around me just near that area, and they were talking, and somehow they were talking something that had to do with a racial issue. And I was not in the conversation, but I was near them. And one of them said, oh, Ruth, about that, didn't mean to say that. And I said, no, they were saying something about racial issues. And I said, excuse me, I am sitting right here. And they said, oh, Ruth, excluded. Didn't even think about it. And they just went on with the conversation because in their minds, I was like one of them. And so it's kind of like a double standard. The good news of that, they really didn't see me as whoever they were talking about on the negative side. Those were those other Black people. It wasn't Ruth, right? But what does that mean? And the sad part, of course, is that they couldn't see that, you got to love all people. And so we become blinded about our own issues. So that's why I said we do have to do that internal search. You got to examine yourself and see where you land, and then be willing to spend some time with God and in His Word to see if you are actually living out what He said, or just kind of carrying a torch that says that, but in your heart, you're like, never, never gonna happen. No way, Jose. So we have to, it starts with, like I said, it's an individual thing. It has to happen within each person, especially those of the house of faith. And not to just slant topic, but a lot of people, of course, are really, really, really tired, all of us, of the virus. And a lot of us have a belief that, God is in control of that virus, continue it or whatever He wants to do. But, I still say, I think he's still trying to get our attention on something. I just think it's not going away because he's trying to get the attention of who? Not those who don't know him, but those who claim to know him. We have to do better at showing God, our creator, and fellow man that we genuinely love them, love God, and we love the people that we share this planet with. We're just not doing as good a job as we could. And each one of us could do better. And I do think that churches is one of the first places to start. Going back to the story real quick about the Bible study group. In that Bible study group, some of the ladies who were coming went to a Baptist church, I won't say which one, but a large Baptist church here in Texas. And they said to me, we would love to have you come. I did Christian workshops also out of my home at that time on spiritual growth and helping people to kind of see God and learn God. And they said, oh, this is so great. And we would like to have you do something like this for our group at our church. And I said, oh, that's fine with me. You work it out with your church and let me know. So they invited me down to their church to talk to some person. And I went to the church and sat there in the office lobby. No one ever came out to meet me. And then finally the person said, referred me back to the woman who attended there and had asked me to come, and said, well, you'll have to follow up with her and she'll give you the response. Long and the short of that is, because I wasn't a part of the Baptist, then I was not allowed to come and teach the women of that, because I was not a denomination. Now, I guess it didn't matter that I grew up Baptist before I became Methodist. Who really cares? Those are just titles. At any rate, I could go on and on about that. But I just said, okay, thank you very much. And so the ladies were just horrified and they just felt terrible about it. I said, well, what can you do? That's just the way it is. But it doesn't have to stay that way. That's all I'm saying. We have to raise these issues, call them out when they happen, and get people to acknowledge truth. Either we all are on the same page and believe the same things, or we don't. And I think this is a day of reckoning, and I think God is really trying to get us there in different ways. He's speaking that to us today, that you got to show me that you have love one for another.
I'm going to jump in at this point, Ruth. That is just excellent, excellent. And I would ask that because you are in a space that uniquely helps us to see some of these things, you have carte blanche to call me out, and I'm inviting you to call us all out in these places where we need to learn some things. Help be an advocate that helps me to see things. I can tell you some stories, but some of the best lessons I've learned have been people that were my friends, people that I trusted, but they had a perspective different from mine. And I am a better person because I invited them into those places in my life where they could say, you can't see this. I have two eyes, but they're both looking forward. And I just don't see these things happening unless somebody calls it to my attention. And so please help us see some of these things. I want us to. We all want to. Thank you for this time together. You're a blessing.